We can, but then it would just merge with you. I think we are live. A very good afternoon to everyone, and a very hearty welcome to all the speakers and the attendees for this panel discussion. On the behalf of Voice of Healthcare, I welcome my guest speakers for this panel discussion, which is on the topic What's Next? Future Readiness and Way Ahead for the Indian IVD Industry. And for this discussion, I have a very august panel with me, and I'd just like to introduce all our speakers. First up, we have Mr. Jatin Mahajan. Sir is the Managing Director at J Mitra and Company Private Limited. We have Mr. Abhinav Thakur. He is the Managing Director at Accurex Biomedical Private Limited and also the Secretary at Association of Diagnostics Manufacturers of India, ADMI. Then up we have Dr. Rahul Varke. Sir is the Director R&D Microbiology at High Media Laboratory Private Limited. We have Professor Ashok Ratan, sir is the advisory, quality research and development at Pathkind Labs. We also have Ms. Urvashi Prasad. She is the Director, Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office at NITI Aayog, Government of India, and she's yet to join us probably in a couple of minutes. Then up we have Dr. Ravi Gaur. Sir is the founder at Dr. G Path Labs and advisor on board Spice Health. Now, also while sharing his expert views, Dr. Gaur will be heading and leading this conversation. So, without any further ado, I'll just hand it over to Sir, Dr. Gaur, and over to you, sir. We can start it.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this panel of Voice of Healthcare. I think thank you so much for Voice of Healthcare. I think which is a very like an important platform and have brought many the leaders and think tanks together for updating and creating advocacies and many other things. I think I'd like to thank Voice of Healthcare for keeping this. These events and activities alive all throughout COVID and going forward. Now, I think welcome to again back to the today's session. We have what's next, future readiness and way ahead for Indian IVD industry. That's very, very important, relevant topic today. And when today, especially after COVID, diagnostics has come at the forefront and they are actually leading from the front and probably they are batting on the front pad and front foot and guiding everybody in healthcare with the way forward. With me, I have a very esteemed and distinguished panelist who have done they have the huge wisdom and experience and knowledge and bubbling with the ideas of innovation and really providing services on ground. They're well in-depth knowledge of the healthcare industry. I have with me Mrs. Urvashi Prasad. She's Director, Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office from NITI Aayog. Welcome, Dr. Urvashi. She just joined on board. Thank you. And I have also with me with the panel is Jatin Mahajan. Jatin is Managing Director, J Mitra and Company Private Limited. Welcome, Jatin.
Thank you.
Then I have with me Abhinav Thakur. Abhinav is, of course, is a Managing Director of Accurex Biomedical Private Limited and Secretary Association of Diagnostic Manufacturers of India. Then I have welcome Abhinav. Then we have Dr. Rahul Varke also with us. He is Director in R&D and Microbiology, High Media Laboratories Private Limited, doing a great work. Welcome, Rahul. And then, of course, I have Professor Ashok Ratan. Of course, I think he's probably the knowledge bank, and he's one with huge experience of almost like 50 years to my mind, probably approximately that kind of a knowledge he carries with him. He's currently advisor quality research and development of Pathkind, but he's worked in multiple forums. Welcome to all of you to this session, and I'm sure will be our audience, and we all will be enlightened with the thought, and probably will come out something great, and we'll probably create something future readiness much better way after sharing this interaction. We start, I think today is an era of diagnostics, and I think they say that for peace of mind, take a test. For everything else, there is a blood test. I think that's something what today we are all talking about. And so with this, I come back straight to the in vitro diagnostic. These are what are these? The IVD are medical devices which require use of assays and reagents to diagnose a medical condition. Moreover, these instruments analyze body fluids, tissue samples, and much more which are collected from the patient. Then, in addition, there are various types of in vitro diagnostic instruments that work on different technologies, as like immunodiagnosis, tissue diagnosis, hematology, molecular diagnosis, and much more. Then they are employed for various medical conditions such as infectious disease, cancer, cardiac disorders, neural disorders, nephrological conditions, and much more. Then again, moreover, of late, the use and handling of the diagnosis, I think it requires the technical expertise, and these instruments are used now right from the basic point of care to the specialized medical facility, which is carried out in the labs. So I think there is a wide spectrum of the IVDs, which is now making a industry by itself and a big industry by itself. And COVID-19 had outbreak had initially been started in I think November 19 or early 2020 had a slightly negative impact on the this diagnostics IVD market. This was probably because the worldwide because of the clinical chemistry was affected because people are not coming forward for the various checkups and there were lockdowns, regions, manpower, manufacturing. There were a lot of issues at that point of time. But I think they bounced back. And further, the market has now experienced a huge positive impact due to surge in the launch of in vitro diagnostic from even COVID-19. There are multiple technologies, multiple processes, and things are available for COVID-19 testing, in addition to the COVID plus test, which are required today. IVDs form a significant and indispensable part of the patient journey in current healthcare system. And over the last 2 decades, they have significantly advanced from just being screening tools. They're not only enabling better health efficiencies, but better economics of treatment as well. This has become better because of now we have use of screening, diagnosis, prognosis, and even monitoring during the treatment cycles. Now, interestingly, yet they form only an insignificant part of the overall cost of healthcare system in the world, actually. According to different estimates, they form about 5%, 2 to 5% of the total healthcare cost. I think that the need is much more, and probably if you utilize them properly, we will be able to get better information and better health economics. Uh, then there have been some issues. I think we'll deliberate upon the rise of IBD, especially because of the chronic disorders, increasing infectious disease, growth in geriatric population, the personalized medicine which is coming up, cancers and arthritis and autoimmune disorders, technological advancement which has happened because of the not only the diagnostic products but the software and IoT and services delivery as such. There have been a wonderful, I think, during the COVID time, we have seen a great government participation where I think the authorities did a wonderful job, and lot many kits, lot many reagents, lot many instruments were very rapidly validated and authenticated, and they came out. That's very, very positive point. But there is, I think, there are some, like still a lot needs requires to be done because there are stringent government regulations are required for quality. And of course, I think much more is required for the rapid growth of this industry. The use of IVD techniques such as molecular diagnostics, point of care testing, and immunodiagnostic is actually growing very, very fast. The high demand for IVD could see structural shift that will have long-term implications for diagnostic test manufacturers. I think that's what I really think about it. Now, with this, the as the with the high technology and regulatory barriers to entry, IVD has been a relatively high margin industry, with molecular diagnostics being one of the fastest growing segments. And as COVID-19 has now spread and all across, as their demand for molecular testing, which is regarded as the gold standard for diagnosis, has also exploded. The volume, but the more important today, we're heading for the point of care molecular testing. The volume of point of care testing has risen during COVID-19 pandemic in response to demand on faster on-site screenings, and such tests can be conducted on physician's office, outside the offices, or outside traditional healthcare settings, drive-through centers, airports, and much more. So, with this background, I'd like to pose my first question to Abhinav Thakur, and my first question to Abhinav is. In vitro diagnostics is basically this, the silent champion of the medical diagnosis. Now, how COVID-19 and demand of POC, the point of care, has given a boost to IoT industry. Abhinav, your take, please.
Necessity is the mother of invention. So this COVID-19 pandemic has really made the point of care a new paradigm in the testing. I'll give you a simple example globally to look at how the effect of this COVID-19 has been on the point of care market. So we all know by far Roche Diagnostics has been the market leader since decades, and they have been by far the market leader. So the second, third, fourth position was like there was a big gap between Roche and the rest of the diagnostic players. In 2020, Roche was about $14.5 billion, and the closest competitor to them was Abbott Diagnostics at $14 billion. The reason for this change, which has happened, and Roche and Abbott have almost come neck to neck, is because of point of care. Earlier, Abbott had acquired a company called Allier for over $5 billion. And at that time, people were like, is it the right decision? Are they doing the right decision or not? There was a big controversy, and they almost got out of the deal. But today, if you look at it, it has paid them, and they have almost at the neck to neck with the market leaders because of their point of care business. Because of their point of care, you've seen Abbott ID Stat, which is being used at the airports a lot. Right, they have the rapid home test, which have been selling all over the world, which is also available in India. So you can see the point of care market in COVID has really opened up, and people are more accessible to it now. People are very like people who never even thought of testing at home earlier. Right? They bought the COVID self test at home. We as a company saw that people were buying more glucometers. Earlier, our glucometer sale was lower pre-COVID, and post-COVID it did pick up. And we saw that a lot of the patients were scared to go to the labs, ended up doing a lot of testing at home. So the entire paradigm has shifted, starting from testing at the physician's office testing, what we call. There are two types of point of care testing. One is the physician's office testing, and one is the self testing at home. So, looking at that, testing has increased in both these areas. So, I think this is some a new era which has started for the point of care. It has got accelerated. It's going to definitely increase, and you can see it as the overall numbers as Abbott has come neck to neck with Roche Diagnostics because of its point of care business.
That's, I think, nice to hear that because the India probably needs multiple combinations to address our challenges. At one point of time, we require a very very rapid testing, and if you look at and the remote areas where there is hardly any facility, and so probably the POCs will be like which is technology driven, but doesn't require a technically skilled person to handle those that highly skilled person to handle those tests. And of course, I think the challenge will be, I think we'll come back to you and the next question, and Fred probably of the panelists, give what are the challenges we'll be facing and where do you see. But I think just quick question from this, do you think today in the COVID, I think every house has got a small clinic within their next to their study table because they have everything probably right from BP instrument, oximeter. They have some sugar, of course, glucometers already there. They are now even they have some rapid cards. People are procuring home rapid cards, get a testing at home. Where do you see the preventive screening? Will you feel that there is going to be a something called a path cafes where people just walk in and probably give a drop of blood, get the 50 tests done, and have a coffee and move out with the results? I think. Do you think we're heading for that?
Right. So you're right. The testing has moved to the house. Like the pulse oximeter, it's a standard part of the first aid kit. What I think. And during the pandemic, there are a lot of these companies, these startups, which have they were there present before, but they have become very popular now. Where there's testing in a bag, suitcase. So there's a suitcase, and you have all the devices inside it, and they conduct the testing. So this is used mainly. What after I interacted with them is used a lot in the corporate side. So a corporate was to carry out a screening, and then they do it there. But the main use, like what you said, is rural India. Like that is where the medical infrastructure is lacking, and a lot of this. testing in a bag, right, or on a suitcase is happening in rural India where they're going in, and is mainly driven by NGOs. So NGOs are driving healthcare in rural India, and you have these products which are going in and being used in the rural settings where there's lack of infrastructure. So this is coming, and this testing at cafes kind of concept also. I'm sure it'll. It's just a matter of time because in the US already in malls we have seen testing has started off because people over there don't have time, and the different dynamic starts over there because home collection is not a reality, right? In India we still have home collection, but in US because cost of labor is so high, home collection is not a reality, so they have to it works out cheaper if they go and do point of care testing or they have testing done in the mall. So in India still, because of home collection being a reality in especially the urban areas, so we don't. I don't see it coming as fast, but it is definitely going to, because people are more open to it now. So if you have a testing cafe, people are more open to it, especially I think airports because like flights are delayed 1 hour. You're just waiting at the airport, and if you have a testing solution and people are just waiting there, they will just get tested. And rural India, I definitely. 70% of our population lives in the rural India, so that's something where this kind of
Yeah, I think
equipment.
that's the great to hear that because they're isolated segment and population and here and there. I think it'll be a big asset help to them, and I'm pretty sure with the time currently the cost or the it probably will also come down. The volume going up. It's going to be more affordable, and I think that's what technology going to do. I think one important point notice is come out of your point is like West versus East because West is using more POCs. Probably in India, home collection is much cheaper and availability is out there. That's probably delaying our point of care testing. But I'm sure soon that the testing of point of care will be much cheaper even than the home collection. So probably they'll be much more into market. Thank you so much. I think we'll come back to you, Abhinav, for the great insight. My next question, I think, have to go to we have Mrs. Urvashi Prachad. Are you there, please? Yeah,
Yes,
I
I'm
think
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like my I think very important question. I think I'll come to you is like during COVID time, the government has actually come out with the very rapid processes and fast track processes for approval of various COVID related products and their technologies and testing, whether it's a molecular or which is antigen or antibody, and probably now we have TrueNAC and CBNAC, and even we have ID now. We have many other molecular based assays. This is a very welcome move, actually. Now, I think, and now diagnostic has proven that they are actually there, and probably without that, survival is be difficult. And if we do a diagnostic in the right way, probably it will go all out in a couple of years to plan our healthcare budgets in a better way and where to depute our really money because many of the patients may not even require to come to the hospital for routine screening, which can be done right there on the spot because the facilities will be available. Now, I think, but these have been a good regulation, but regulations and schemes by the government of India has come out now. There is something called the performance-based PLI scheme, and will this boost IVD industry? Atmanirbhar Bharat, where are we heading for? And how many companies are there? You must have probably seen many companies now coming forward for applying for IVD for this PLI scheme, getting registered and benefits. Can you throw some light and let us know what little bit of has been done, what more has been done by the government of India, and what is in store for us? Urvashi, please.
Yeah, sure. So I think the whole regulatory and policy landscape has really evolved when we look at this space. I think we started at a very nascent stage, and in many aspects we still are at early stages, I would say, in terms of how evolved our regulation or our policies are. But a lot of steps have been taken, and many more are sort of under consideration. Of course, COVID has brought in another element now, a big element that we need to relook at everything in the light of COVID. But regardless of that, we have been looking at different kinds of policies, incentives, and also the streamlining of the regulations, the rules. I think that is something, the feedback we get from industry repeatedly. And at least being at Niti Aayog, we do try to channel that through to the line ministries, through to the higher levels in the government, to say how do we also streamline our regulatory processes and sort of reduce that kind of regulatory hurdle on the one hand. On the other hand, have increased recognition, whether it's for IVDs or other kinds of medical devices in the policy arena. So I think that I think this has to be looked at in sort of that context, that this is an ongoing process. But you mentioned a few points which I'll take up further. So the performance linked incentive scheme, definitely, I think the idea there at this point has been to really sort of reduce our import sort of dependency, to really boost manufacturing, both on the on the side of drugs, pharma, as well as on medical devices, diagnostics, to really give a fillip to our domestic manufacturing. So I think that has been the prime intent behind this initial set of schemes that has come. But what we are also looking at is research, because we can't look at manufacturing or production obviously in isolation or by itself. We do have to look at R&D, and we have to look at how do we boost that as well. So we're also looking at some specific initiatives, and I would just say watch the space on this. There might be things that come out in the future, in terms of how do we actually give a fillip to R&D in our domestic space, to really sort of account for a lot of good work that startups are doing. During the COVID time, especially, we saw a lot of startups coming up with a whole range of innovations on diagnostics, on various other aspects. So, how do we give a further fillip to this in the post-COVID era as well? So I think that is another big emphasis that we're trying to lay on the policy side. But I think overall it is about addressing a lot of the challenges that we've had. So I mentioned import dependency, our cost of manufacturing, various other access to the enabling environment. That is something which is a big challenge. Really, a lot of hurdles which can help our companies to reach scale. I think that is what is the priority for us. We do have a lot of smaller efforts in this space, but how do we ensure that many of those, or a large share of those, really reach that level of scale? So I think that is one big dimension. The other one, since we touched upon it, the rural and urban, I think that's a very, very big challenge for us from the policy perspective, because obviously, from the government's point of view, you are not just catering, to the urban segment or to a few large metropolitans or even smaller, tier two, tier three. We need to go even beyond that. Into our more rural, remote areas. And of course, a lot of the other initiatives that the government has launched over the years, whether it's Ayushman Bharat, if you see, we're trying to catalyze more investment into healthcare in our tier two, tier three cities, towns, and then go even beyond that. So the other pillar of Ayushman Bharat, one, of course, is this health insurance scheme, but the other is the health and wellness centers. And we're actually really focusing on these in a big way, because in rural areas, in remote areas, even if you don't have, everybody in a household, sort of doing these tests, we can at least create hubs for these kind of diagnostics, for these kind of tests at the health and wellness centers. And I think this could be a big avenue for public-private partnerships going forward. So we're really trying to focus on these centers to strengthen them, because we've had primary health centers in the country for decades. Our challenge is how do we make these health and wellness centers different, in the sense that they should actually be functional. They should be providing the whole gamut of primary healthcare services, which also includes an emphasis on non-communicable diseases. Because India, as we know, we are not just grappling with infectious diseases, we're also grappling with a growing burden of NCDs, cancers, diabetes, heart-related issues, and now, of course, COVID is, throwing in a lot of additional challenges into the mix. So I think that is the other element we are looking at, that how do we also really cater to this massive, it's really, one wouldn't call it a segment, because that's where still much of India still lives. So how do we really make sure that whatever we're doing in terms of innovations, in terms of access to services, is also reaching these populations? So I think that is the other big sort of overarching focus that we have here. So I'll stop here, but happy to have further discussions on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Urvashi. I think very relevant points you have touched upon. And I think, firstly, of course, it's very good thought process, like the point of care testing or near patient testing, which can be done in the health and wellness centers, which is, I think, a welcome move in any case. That's really happening, and I think we like to see probably the over, I think, next 5 years, much more happening. I'm very sure about it, and that will happen, and that will probably we'll be able to deliver to the last man outpost there. Otherwise, the all this advancement is restricted to maybe tier one, tier two, little bit of tier three. Beyond that, it hardly moves, and but the need is actually in the tier three and the tier four out there. I think that's something POC probably or near patient care will help out. I think one, another important point you touched is, I'm sure Dr. Ashok Ratan will be happy with that, the R&D investment. I think the research and development, I think we really need to focus more on R&D. And I'm sure the industry veterans, industry leaders, Jatin is here, we have Rahul and other people, we are willing to put into investment, but I think they need to look into sustainability and scalability, because they might put money today, but there's such a rapid evolution of technology. Today something has come up, tomorrow something will up. Probably we need to work out in some areas how to make sure we have invested some money. So will they be compensated? Will they be, how do they work out? I think that's something we will be maybe, and I think already probably the second question I'm going to ask you, make probably some throw lights on that, and maybe we can share some views, other speakers also on that. Now, I think lastly, one important is, like, still the mindset is say that this is the foreign product. I think, which is, I think, we need to really work on, because I think it should be other way, because we have a startups in a wonderful job. They need to be taken to the next level, and the mindset should be like, this is our product. And in fact, rather, it's not even a smaller country like Estonia, even some Taiwan. A lot of products have been here in India and we use, and they're saying this is a foreign product. I think that is where I think we need probably to go all out, and the government can help out to make sure that the Indian products, product manufactured in India, the high quality and cost affordability, and probably that will help the industry. When we come back to you on the second question, thank you for your inputs. With this, I move on to we have two veterans, Dr. Rahul and Jatin. I think I will. This question is to both of you. Maybe Jatin can start and followed by Rahul. Like, how does the next decade looks like? From 2021-23, because it is the era of, we talk about digital clinical diagnostics. We have artificial intelligence, machine learning, and we have IoT. How is this actually the next generation technologies? I mean, not only the basics, we're talking about the high-end technology like genomics, NGS, CRISPR, or this is like RT-PCR, will they will take NGS and CRISPR? But otherwise, the next generation technologies, how are they changing the industry? Just in your views, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ravi. And before I begin, I would like to thank Voice of Healthcare for inviting me here and to be part of this discussion. What I would like to share here is, my experience of a couple of years, and specifically last 2 years. What I see is that there is a lot of disruption which will happen because of machine learning and Internet of Things. And in fact, in times to come, what will happen is they will these technologies will kind of revolutionize how things are being done and the way they are being done. Sorry, because of the advancements which are happening in the technology space. So what is happening is there is a lot of acceptance now, and with advancement in technologies, what is also enabling the healthcare users is the cost of deploying, and the cost of deployment is in fact reducing over a period of time. What we also see here is that, in the entire ecosystem, diagnostic forms the core, the pivot, because 70% of the medical decisions or the clinician decisions are based on these diagnostic tests. So what happens is a lot of data is being generated while the test is being performed. And when we have a lot of data, we need a tool which is able to analyze these data and able to kind of give a line of direction as to what So this level of accuracy and precision can happen with these tools, which are now being deployed on a mass scale level. In fact, uh, COVID has in fact accelerated as what Abhinav and Urvishiji were talking about. They were talking about tier two, tier three, tier four cities where even technology uh, is available, but that's a very primitive and a basic technology. But because of the point of care testing and IoT being deployed, things have become easier and simpler because the turnaround, time for testing or turnaround time for even reporting or for the patient to receive the report has drastically reduced. So, for example, like Abhinav talked about the point of care testing at home. Now, sitting at home, I can get my results because in case if I have a doubt that maybe I have a particular disease, then I can do that test and immediately come to know my status, which is important, whether it's a COVID test or whether it is a diabetes test. So, point of care has been uh, prevalent as far as the diabetes testing is concerned. Now, coming back to machine learning, what is also happening is, Urvashiti talked about training. So, training is again a cost for the healthcare, uh, healthcare settings, and it is only going to increase over a period of time. So, what is important is if we can deploy these technologies. So, the impact of these technologies is that it will reduce the cost of training, so that immediately we can get the results in the shortest possible period of time. Another thing that what we have seen is that the errors which are happening while testing or even while reporting. So all these errors will in fact get reduced when we deploy technology, because precision and accuracy are the two attributes when we deploy technology, and they will assure not only the healthcare setting at the healthcare setting, but also at the patient level, that whatever reports they are getting is precise and accurate. So this we have seen. Now, as far as the other things are concerned, as far as the impact of technology, machine learning. So at the resources level also, no, sometimes we find it difficult. So at the healthcare settings, sometimes sourcing of talent is going to be difficult. So by deploying these technologies, what we are doing is either we're reducing the manpower cost or we are replacing them. Now, if you look at the overall positive benefits, what is happening is when the analysis or the data crunching is done by the technology, this data is now available with the doctor. And when the doctor is prescribing the line of treatment to the patient, there is a human touch, because not only at the basic level the data is given, but even for the complicated cases like cancer or any other difficult diseases, and human touch can be there, which is facilitated by the doctor, and then concerns can be put to rest as far as the patient care is concerned. So overall, I feel that in the next couple of years, with the reducing cost and acceptance, I think acceptance of this technology is also there to a very high extent because of the COVID. And so what we will do is we will actually be able to prevent and mitigate the onslaught of any diseases, just like what we've seen in COVID. The 3T technology, the 3T policy, which was adopted, which is the testing, tracing, and then tracking. So all this thing was deployed so that whatever the hot zones or containment zones are there, so that prevention can be there. So overall, this is good for all the people and the society at large. And I feel that going forward, this is a very good option, and it will benefit the mankind as a whole. Thank you.
Good, Jatin. I think you really gave a detailed insight of the new decade forward. Probably the journey going to be on that track. And I think I like to probably add two things. You add TTT, testing, tracking, and all three T's basically, three things. I'll say the TTT keep another two. They keep trying with the technology. I think another thing, which is something that will complete the solution. That's going to probably going forward. I think before I come back to the one of my question to you is like I'd like to ask Rahul, your take, please, on this.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I would like to thank UH for giving this opportunity to speak. So during COVID, we saw a big revolution in the whole IVD industry. And one big thing which was very critical during COVID was non-contact diagnosis. And there was an acute shortage of phlebotomists and technicians in laboratories. Every laboratory was calling up universities, colleges. Can you send us a microbiologist or a basic biotechnologies who can come and handle my RT-PCR machines? Can you send me people who are trained DMLT who can go and do sampling using PE kits and all these kinds of things propped up? So IoT and machine learning plays a very important role in this because trust me, we had, this is a fact that we had technicians who got trained overnight and were running PCR tests for the entire population. And we also had phlebotomists. I don't know, it's a big question mark. So in these cases, point of care becomes a big deal. And I would not like to reiterate what was mentioned before. But coming back to Internet of Things and machine learning, what we understand and what we feel is critical that all the test reports were regulated by ICMR, and everybody had to submit the report every day evening. Every laboratory had to submit the reports to before they were given out, or there was a very good control and regulation by the government on these. So if IoT was used very meticulously, and of course nothing was planned here, so I don't blame anybody here, but if IoT was used here, every test data would be collected in one place in Delhi or somewhere in India, and all the tests could be monitored sitting in one place. So IoT plays a very important role in these applications. So non-contact diagnosis is the buzzword. People would like to do as much as non-contact diagnosis when it comes to epidemics like COVID. But as we go ahead, there are a lot of other applications of machine learning and IoT, which has opened up avenues, and people are now open to it. They are ready to accept these, utilize them in their laboratories. For example, let's say if you're doing a COVID test and you're extracting the RNA, how good or bad it is, how good or bad the RNA is or the DNA is. A machine, so there are softwares which of course we also have developed, and a lot of companies have developed. So this brings in a good quality control check in the way IVD is carried out, or in the way the tests are carried out. So machine learning plays a very important role here, where you can actually check the quality, and you can put in parameters at every stage at how good or bad the test being carried out at various stages of the test is important. Another important thing is that a test is as good, the interpretation of the data is as good as how the raw data is. So the real world data, that is what it is called as. The raw data is the real world data. That is where machine learning comes from. And real world data will depend a lot on how good your instruments are, how good and validated your tests are. And depending on that, the machine learning works. So as I mentioned before, that customers are, the quality of the test is very important. How it is diagnosed is very important. And I think going ahead for the government, IoT will be very critical. So they can keep a tab on what's happening. Are the data, is the result being manipulated? And even for the patient, for that matter, if tomorrow I give a sample to a laboratory and I get an online report or online how the test was carried out, how it was executed, how good the quality of the RNA extracted from my sample was. If I get all this data online, IoT will be the future, and it is going to come in. Machine learning, as I mentioned before, will help us. Machine learning has a tremendous scope in genomics. And in genomics, we'll see that more and more of these So right now we are just focusing on the virus, but if you come back to the typical infectious diseases like most of the bacterial multi-drug resistant diseases, you will see that the data crunching will be very important. Like how many people liability and how does the patient, how does the doctor, clinician use this data for further clinical treatment. So I guess machine learning and IoT has big futures, and this pandemic has given a lot of opportunities to many industries to focus on them. A lot of platforms have already in where these technologies are being used. I
I think, thank you, Rahul. I think it's a good, really, the era of definitely machine learning. It's the era of, where actually maybe, your data, which is really, the right kind of data which goes inside the system and gives you a real, a personal or personalized medicine or diagnosis. I think that's something which is, because it may not be, because the test, five people take the same kind of a test and all of them have a similar report, but two end up with some diagnostic hypertension, one with diabetes, and two nothing happens to another two. I think this is something with the, our AI and the whatever is going to work, and the machine learning, of course, they automate things happening. Better the data, better we are. But I think one important point you raised here is the quality. I think that's something, because more and more testing happening in the preventive space, more and more point of care near patient, and the screening methodology, treatment and monitoring. I think unless your quality is accurate, or if you're using a more of POCs probably or near patient, the diagnosis shifting from the centralized laboratories to the peripheral laboratories now. And with this, I think quality is going to be an important point. And I think that my first this question goes to Professor Ashok Rattan, sir. You have a extreme experience of the labs, multiple labs of all nature, right from research background to the running of the labs. I mean, there are multiple challenges and expectations. How can diagnostics play a balance quality, accessible, and affordable healthcare? I think all are integrated together. How, I think, your views, please, and that helps us a lot to understand.
Thank you, sir. And diagnosis is a fundamental part of clinical medicine and a prerequisite for delivery of high quality, effective, and safe patient care. Yet, diagnostic performance is often understudied and unmeasured. Excellence in diagnosis is assumed rather than demonstrated. Diagnostic acumen is often financially unrewarded. Data from India is lacking, but in a study in USA in 2017 on 2,500 patients, they found that diagnostic mistakes was the common source of error. This error could be misdiagnosis, incorrect diagnosis, or delayed diagnosis. When diagnostic errors occur, they have potential to cause harm to patient. Given its profound influence on patient outcome, diagnostic deserves heightened attention. Optimal diagnostic process would be timely, cost effective, convenient, understood by the patient, and avoid diagnostic errors. Diagnostics error could be error in strategy, that is, failure to choose the most appropriate test. Second is error in execution, harm from conduct of the test. Third is error in interpretation, which could be over interpretation, under interpretation, or misinterpretation, and errors in communication with the patient. Diagnostic excellence would contribute to patient care in providing safe, effective, patient centered, timely, efficient, and equitable service to the citizens of India. Now, Government of India through ICMR has drawn up a national essential diagnostic test list that should be available in order to address the health problems in India. They have indicated what services need to be made available in a tiered manner, and we should all work in a PPP mode to convert these excellent intentions into reality. Point of care testing is one is has been hailed as an efficient and innovative way to manage infectious disease particularly in resource-constrained situation. But it is essential that diagnosis and initiation of treatment should be started at the first point of contact with the patient. There are studies available indicating why point of care testing has not succeeded in India and what are the barriers to adapting point of care. I think what is required is to have changes in policies as well as regulation to make sure that the point of care testing are quality controlled at center, then they are monitored, their performance is monitored, and not only testing but treatment available at the same time. And there's the assured criteria. WHO has initially started a criteria known as assured, which was affordable, sensitive, specific, user friendly, rapid, and equipment free, to which now they have added reassured, which is real time connectivity and ease of specimen collection. So, if we have reassured point of care testing and not only testing but treatment, then I think we would be able to address the problems which are faced by multiple of people in far off places.
Great, sir. I think definitely this is very reassuring to hear that because that's what the need of the country is today. But I think one important question for all of us here today is because the how do you assess the cost of quality? Because that's something because when you go for we have a Mrs. Urvashi right here, the Gerben kind of a thing. We have like you come from the lab industry, and we have other the IVD providers because the cost capping everything because sometimes it's happened it just happens across the table, and this is really don't know how do you what is the value of the quality because then nobody really has a good the how many controls you run, what is the calibrator, what are the precision, what is the methodology, what technique, how much money is going to R&D, all kind of a thing. I think we really need to devise a methodology where you have a cost to quality, cost per test, reportable test, along with that the cost of the quality. I think that should be one of the important point, which is now probably happening in many of the tenders. They talk about technical bit and the financial bit together. Probably a more need to be done out there. That will help us out to emphasize on the quality part. We'll come back to you, sir, after that, on the second round. And I just come back to the on the first round, the second question of the rounds here. One thing which is coming to my mind is definitely yes. Okay, today, I think we are heading for innovation. We disruptive innovations which are required in the country for the healthcare needs of our country. But probably the IT is going to play a very important role. Maybe we have you might see robotization of the labs happening probably. All the robots are really working inside the machines today. They're already there. Everything is getting automated. But more of a automation, you may find some kind of a. And there are, I think, the bigger labs probably heading for a better and higher technologies. The smaller and satellite labs or local centers or wellness centers, which are there in the periphery, going for a point of care or screening testing, which is going to happen. I think this is getting slightly clearer. And with time, that will become a more clear picture, I think, in next coming. And we have now unique Prime Minister's program, National Digital Health, unique digital health mission, where I think every data has been now trying to be integrated together. That will give a little broad, much deeper insight to what's really required and what are the hotspot, which areas are require more attention and more focus on different aspects of disease, whether it's infectious or the lifestyle or it is just the non-communicable other disorders. My next question goes to, I think, come back to Abhinav and Rahul, but to you for that matter. What are the emerging now business models and new areas of business as a result of Made in India campaign, and how conventional models will get affected? This was something I just talked about, like the central lab processing, the referral lab, or the routine lab. So what are the new emerging business models, and what is going to be, the future as we go forward? We can start with Abhinav, please.
So I'll start with first from the manufacturing point of view. From the manufacturing point of view, we have seen the kind of invest in this industry has never been the kind of industry I've seen post-COVID. I would estimate at least 40 new companies have started off during COVID into the space, manufacturing companies. So this is excellent for us because we are so much import dependent. 70% of our diagnostics are imported, including the reagents and instruments together. In the reagents, we are importing less, but in the equipments, we are importing a lot. So the lot of import substitution is what I'm seeing coming forward is the new change that is going to happen in terms of if you look at the basic, right, the classic study of PPEs, N95 masks, right, those are not being made in the country. Coming to VTMs, right, VTMs are being imported for the swabs, right? The swab manufacturing wasn't available in India at all. The swab manufacturing started. VTMs, we had no requirement for imports. RT-PCR, we have no requirements for imports. Now we're self-sufficient in India. So I see that a lot of the labs in India have also seen that when during the COVID pandemic, the supply chain was really affected, right? So all the countries were competing for the products, the diagnostic products, as it was in shortage. And the companies that were manufacturing in India that were local were able to supply the products in a shorter turnaround time. So that's when the industry understood the importance of having someone local. When you have a stronger service delivery agreement where you can have a shorter turnaround time. So I think that is something new which we're going to see happening, that more and more customers are going to go towards domestic manufacturing companies, be it Indian companies or multinationals who are making in India, because they have realized the importance of having a robust supply chain available. And another big change, as I said, we have seen over 40 companies who have entered the industry, and there's going to be a more and more import substitution happening as we see PLI schemes coming in and different kind of schemes to support the industry to move ahead in this. In terms of the lab space, moving to the lab space, there has never been so much excitement in this industry. So if you look at in terms of the investments that have happened, the largest investment happened by Farm Easy at about 66% stake in Arabia for 4,546 crores. Then that was followed by Dr. Lal acquiring Suburban Diagnostics for 925 crores. At around the same time, High Tech Laboratories was acquired by Metropolis for 636 crores. Listing happening of Vijay Diagnostics and Krishna Diagnostics. And this is at the level which you hear about it in the media. But when you go down to the grassroots, again, there is a lot of new labs which I have seen start up. Be it the chain labs opening up new labs in satellite cities where there was no service given before, or new labs, just small labs starting off in areas where there were no labs before. So this is again a new change. I'm seeing that there are more labs coming up, especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities, which is very good because these areas were not being serviced before. So very good news from all the fronts. From the manufacturing side, a lot of investments happening due to the PLI scheme. From the services side, again, a lot of investments happening from the be it the private equity, be it from the stock market, from the public, or be it from even internal accruals of the organized players. So overall, I think this is very good for the industry. And finally, diagnostics has got its due, where, as we discussed, we have only 2% of the healthcare cost, but affecting 70% of the healthcare delivery delivery model. So
Yeah.
it's a very good for all of us and the public
Yeah.
at large.
Thanks, Abhinav. I think I'm pretty sure because I come from a diagnostic background and I feel this is a good news for all of the diagnostic providers. And of course, most important for the healthcare because now it'll be evidence-based medicine. I think that's very, very important because without no point, getting starting a treatment without the basic diagnosis. A hit and trial probably get over. Now, of course, that always remains in the clinical specialty. But I think with the better testing, faster testing, quality-driven testing, more specific and personalized testing, I think there'll be it's a good news for the healthcare for not only for diagnostic providers, but the manufacturers and of course the entire healthcare industry. Rahul, your take, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess Abhinav came with a better homework than I have done, but I'll give you more of a futuristic philosophical approach, which I think should happen and will probably happen. Is Abhinav was absolutely spot on when it says that Indian products will take a forefront. And it will not only help us cater to our domestic market, but also propel us in global markets because we'll be at par. But I feel what is important is that we need a very good hand holding from the government here. And we would really appreciate if the government really helps us streamline and filter off quality manufacturers and encourage them to come up rather than making technologies available to anybody and everybody, which is affecting the quality of the testing. And that is of utmost importance. And going ahead, as Professor Sir said, that the clinical the clinical the clinicians are completely dependent on the diagnostic test, and without without a proper accurate diagnostic test, the clinicians are lurking in the dark. So the government will definitely help it come in. And I've seen during the pandemic the proactive approach of the government was so good, and I really thank them and appreciate their efforts in helping each and everybody come up, gear up to this process. And Make in India was given emphasis. We saw the big challenges of supply chain for raw materials during the pandemic, and everybody geared up, everybody pulled their socks off and set up shops in India manufacturing. So preparedness or readiness for the next pandemic, I hope there is no such pandemic, but being ready with kits, products should be of utmost importance, and industries will understand that they will be ready. So for example, we were the ones making the VTM when the pandemic came in March, and the VTM which we were making was from the SARS test, and it was used extensively during the SARS test globally and in India. And we just had the kit, we just had to give it away. The only thing we had to do is start making a few lakh tests a day. So the preparedness should be there, and that is something very important. Now coming back to the automation, the Indian customer is more aware now about his requirements, and he doesn't want to work with a closed system anymore. So more and more laboratories, diagnostic laboratories, scientists, they will want an open system, an open platform where they'll say that if I buy this machine, I should be able to use reagents from any manufacturer. Yeah. And that is something which even the government should emphasize on, that making an open platform for research. So we should not be stuck with one manufacturer coming through some foundation that we only have to use this test because the foundation is giving money right now. Maybe down the line, the foundation stops giving money. Then what is going to happen to the masses? There is no other tests in parallel to these tests. So I think open platforms are very important, and not only the manufacturers but also the users should emphasize and see to it that they are available with open platforms. So tomorrow, if there is one supplier, he is not able to supply, somebody else should be able to fill in the gap, and the test should go on. So going ahead, these few things will play a very important role, but I feel that the government should help the IVD industry, the testing laboratories, and bring in some regulation in who is manufacturing and is he doing the right test. There should be multiple places, multiple laboratories where manufacturers can go and get their tests validated, rather than limiting it to one or two approval authorities. So there is going to be a revolution for sure. One very important thing which was already mentioned and which I see coming ahead is point of care. And we will see a lot more satellite labs because the technology is now affordable. You can have an RT-PCR testing laboratory in a small setup in a small shop, and there's not much to set. So there will be more smaller laboratories where more tests will be carried out rather than pooling samples and sending it to a central laboratory. So that could be a big change because the technology is affordable now. Smaller labs, multiple smaller laboratories will be set up all over the country. Even in small cities in the suburbs, they'll have multiple labs. In smaller B or C grade tier cities, there will be more testing. So POC in that way will be accessible. The testing will be more affordable. That's what, as manufacturers, we would like to bring in, that more affordable testing at a very good quality. More good quality product at an affordable price. So that should be the model for it.
Rahul, that's an important point you talked about. I think quality and affordability, of course. I think one important question you raised, I'll probably go to now, Mrs. Urvashi Prasad. I think like government support There's a lot of transformation of Indian healthcare industry happening, and I think government of India is also have accelerating the same. But I think, but there is a quality is equally important. So are we heading for the stringent kind of a quality, the regulations? But sometimes stringent regulations are barrier to the entry of the newer players and these things also. So whether it's are we going to relax the barriers, more stringent or stringent with the more accessibility and better, faster, fast track this thing, and different type of use of technology, like sample type. Probably we may not require blood. Can it be saliva? Can it be sputum? Can it be body fluids? And so, and then lastly, is it like, it's, I think we have to reduce our dependency on the exports, because the closed system, what we talked about, because that's something which is, if suppose we got an instrument from Abbott and supplies have not been coming from US, this is what we saw in Roche and other things, and we had a D-dimer shortage for 5-7 days, the reports are not available. But Indian industry has proven forward, where the COVID RT-PCR reports were actually given almost by all by 48 hours, even less than that. Today, but much 6 to 8 hours. But in the world, at one point of time, they were reporting in 7 to 14 days. I think we have shown our strength. Where is the government view? Are we going to? How do you feel that? Shouldn't we showcase our strength to the world? Should we take a delegation of the people across the world? Look, we have done this. This is our manufacturing product. What your views, please, Mr. Urvashi?
Yes, so I think there's obviously many dimensions to this, and I think this is constantly challenge that you, on the one hand, you want to obviously ensure good quality, but also you want to keep your regulations, barriers to entry also as sort of simplified and streamlined as possible. So I think this is, I mean, ideally this should not be a trade-off, but often there are sort of clashes between these two objectives, because every time government, for instance, brings in a new regulation or a new step in the process, there's obviously pushback from a lot of stakeholders that this is going to make it much harder for us. So I think we are constantly in this not very enviable position of having to balance all the different objectives. But I think yes, that is one way to do it, which you also suggested, that where we can have some innovation. So where we can say that instead of requiring a particular type of specimen, we can go with something else which might be less costly, might be easier to source. Then I think those are the kinds of really sort of innovations which can help us to also make it simpler yet maintain quality. So I think those are the kinds of ideas we also seek from industry, and the research, boosting research that I was talking about. This is exactly what we're trying to do in this. We've actually reached out to a very large number of industry stakeholders. This is across pharma, medtech, and different sizes, scales. It's not just the big players, but also the smaller ones, also the startups, to say that how do we really address these different dimensions. So we want to ensure quality, we want to ensure affordability, because again, as I said, for the government, it's, you're never just catering to a small segment. You have to think about the last mile and the last citizen that you need to reach. So of course we have these objectives, but also how do we really yet not make our system so difficult and so complex and have so many regulatory hurdles that a lot of the players say that we simply can't get through these, or it takes us too much time, or there's too much cost involved. So all those kind of issues we are constantly looking at. Even in clinical trials, for instance, we're doing a very deep analysis right now to see how do we streamline, what do we make simpler, and yet of course we don't want to compromise on the quality in any which way. So that's why I said this is a bit of an ongoing process, because it is simply so complex, and there are so many perspectives that need to be taken into account, and also different objectives that we want to meet. So I think that is something we are doing. The COVID pandemic has obviously given us a lot of learnings, which we will be taking forward. We definitely want to showcase, a lot of the innovations, the good work that has happened, and most importantly, the partnership between government, between industry, civil society, academia. I mean, this is one occasion where we really saw all the different stakeholders coming together, and there's so much good that came out of it. So I think we want to showcase it, but we also want to build on it, So that it's not just that, because we had a crisis we were able to do this. How do we make this something much more sustainable, and something that we continue to do in the future as well? I think that is something that we're trying to do. One last point I'll make, on this. I think Jatin ji raised it, and I really thought it was an important one, was on data. Because a lot of our efforts are also going into data. Especially when we look at the health sector, it is obviously a very data rich sector. It's an information intensive sector, and yet, our data has sort of been all over the place. It's not really been integrated, in sort of a true sense for us to be able to do robust analytics, or for us to be able to, even share it for research purposes or various other purposes. So a lot of our effort is also going into strengthening our data system, of course, through use of technologies. That is a big component, but a lot of it is also streamlining the existing systems, making sure we have the integration between the public and private players, because otherwise, often these data systems, don't even talk to each other, and they're all fragmented. So we are obviously losing out on a big opportunity if we're not able to get all this together and really do strong analytics on this. So that is one big effort that we are making. In fact, Niti Aayog is working on the National Data Analytics Platform as well, which should be launched soon enough. Where this is one of the objectives, and health is, of course, one major sector there, where we have tried to pull in different resources, use technology, and try to improve our data systems. So again, a lot of this is work in progress. But I think just to say that these are very important, very complex issues which the government is trying to work on at different levels. Thank you.
Thank you for giving a detailed assurance and detailed insight. I think COVID has really proven that the researchers, manufacturers, the service providers, private and the public, then we have you can say the academic people and of course regulatory authorities coming together. All of them work together, and we were able to provide solution and take the country out of what we are seeing today, a much way ahead. I think from the many others the developed countries, I think we have taken care of that. I think probably this should continue, and that would be good. Even probably we can have some round tables. We can have more such groups coming together, private public partnership, maybe especially on these all people, because sometimes they work in isolation. Researchers work separately, and service provider work separately, and the regulatory authorities probably just have a little superficial because they require know what's happening on the ground. I think all of them together, that's good to the future ahead. Thank you so much. I think we have just a couple of minutes left. I have two questions, one to Jatin and one to Professor Ratan. Jatin, I think the short 2 minutes probably, how do you how has the IVD market changed in the past and future due to COVID with collaboration companies and countries globally? I think little because that learning probably we can have from you, and probably you are there, that will help us out to understand what's happening in the world and now in India.
So thank you so much. And what I would like to share here is that lot of collaborations have happened during this pandemic, but what is echoed by my colleagues also, a lot yet needs to be done, because India can become a superpower as far as the IVD sector is concerned. We can put India on the world map because of the frugal engineering systems that exist in the country today. Unfortunately, what has been echoed by most of my colleagues here stands correct, And, one of the things is policy, the government policy. So I have a different take on that. If you look at the manufacturing sector, it's not just the regulation, because for frankly speaking, regulation, I think, is very friendly nowadays, because we get approvals very fast. But apart from regulation, there are other approvals to be done, both at the state as well as at the center. So for example, opening up a unit, a manufacturing unit, we need 30 plus approvals. So we need to have a single window clearance, so that, it can be, there is an ease of business. So if we have to fulfill the vision of our Prime Minister, ease of doing business. So this is one fundamental aspect. Then even in terms of taxation, I mean, that has also to be friendly, because R&D requires a lot of investment. So a lot of capital investments go upfront, and returns, we don't know about returns. So maybe returns can be after 5 years, or it can be no returns as well. Now, another thing what we have seen is, the source of raw material. Now, in pandemic, everything came to a standstill because most of the companies were dependent on China, for sourcing of their raw materials. Now, just to give some academic perspective, we have more than 6,000 plus diseases in the world. Now, I'm not saying that India should manufacture all 6,000. Wherever there is potential, we should manufacture that. But then the critical ingredient is the raw material aspect. So we must have a lot of companies, and that is where we need to incentivize so that a investor or a promoter can actually build up the raw materials to be supplied to the manufacturing side. The other aspect which I also understand is the infrastructure, the training, which Rahul also had mentioned. Training is one area where the government should also facilitate. So there has to be, like there are institutions like NIPER, there has to be many more such institutes where training is being provided, whether it's a phlebotomist, whether it's a lab technician or a medical technologist or whomsoever. Because even in the industry, the main challenge in times to come is going to be finding capable people who can execute the processes which have been defined, so that the main aspect of quality assurance and certification is there. The third thing is diagnostics in India right now is in the MSME segment. 70 to 80% of the companies are in the MSME sector. So a lot of handholding has to be done over there. So this is also very important. So I believe that holistically, all these things need to be considered, and definitely, as I mentioned, and what my colleagues also said, government handholding has to be there with respect to all these parameters. And in fact, I would like to share that India is one such country which is taking a lead in terms of products quality standards. So in infectious disease and other things, there is a government institution, because I'm part of that committee. So we are formulating product standards, which probably is not being done as far as the diagnostic industry across the world. So we are now, if things go in a positive side, we'll be setting those product standards so that we can provide quality products to the world. Also, another thing is, since we are in the MSME sector, companies which are supplying to India, a product or a company certification like ICMed should be available, which is basically assuring to the customers. Dr. God, you also mentioned, why people are preferring imported products is because that assurance is not there. So, we have a homegrown Indian standard called ICMed. If that assurance is given by the companies who have a ICMID certification that yes, the product conforms to certain quality standards, then I think this will also help in facilitating of the requirement with respect to the users. And
Thank you. I think Jatin, we I think maybe running short of
other
time,
things,
but I
yeah.
think you have a bit of very important point, and we have Ms. Urvashi, representing us on the government side. I'm sure she must have heard all this, and we don't have really time. It would have been a pleasure to hear from her what's the government take, but I'm sure those points have been well taken, and we'll be able to somewhere the government will understand that and take it forward. I have just 1 minute. Probably I'll take more. Probably we have Professor Ratan. Sir, you have heard everything. You have experience. You have everything. I'd like to hear your word of wisdom. What exactly, in a nutshell, what should be in 1 minute? You can talk about something. How does ultimately we make this diagnostic testing affordable, accessible, and quality? Any last wisdom point of view from your side, sir?
What is required is to make things happen. That means we should have the point of care and made available where treatment is going to occur. I'll just give you one example. I was making a presentation ready for using PCT, procalcitonin, before starting antibiotic. Now, in the West, it has been shown that if you use this system, then you save $6 million in a year in one hospital on excessive unnecessary use of antibiotics. The trouble is that PCT is available in centralized placed and is costlier than the antibiotics. So in India, antibiotic stewardship program cannot run on this basis because PCT itself is very costly. So if PCT was point of care available and cheaper than the antibiotic that they're going to use, then there is evidence available that unnecessary use of antibiotics can be completely stopped, and continuous use of antibiotics can be stopped when PCT falls. But because PCT is a good marker for bacterial infection, and only bacterial infection and not viral infection. So antibiotics will not be used. So if PCT, that means we need not think only as diagnostic test, but also how the diagnostic test will be used to change the whole system and get benefit to the patient.
Yeah, I think the very important point, sir. I think we should not really see the cost of a diagnostic test, but I think the overall benefit and the cost will reduce in healthcare. I think this is something which is very important. We should be seen. But for that, I think we need to integrate it well into our healthcare community. We cannot work in isolation. It's time that we all become more of a clinical solution provider from pathologists, and we probably work very closely with the manufacturers, right? This is what we need, and this is where I think the team of manufacturers, providers, and of course the diagnostic, I think the skill and scientists have to work together to come out with. With this, we have run over short our time. I'd like to thank everybody of you and sparing your time and giving you valuable insight. But let's close down, I think, with the statement, innovation renewals are required to keep a lab on the frontier of science. Without that, I don't think. So I think, but today we are ready. I think all we require is the integration of all. We require a strong government support. I think government has promised us, and they've shown by example. They're doing a lot, and I think a lot isn't promised also to us. Similarly, the manufacturers, service providers, and of course the skill. Without that, has to be there. I think that all this put together, we can really be ready. We are in fact ready today. Probably some hurdles will be ready for the future, and I'm sure the next pandemic hopefully doesn't come again, but if it ever comes, something of this nature, we will be able to fight it out and probably finish it off within no time, not like prolonged for 2 years. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody. And with this, I thank you, hand over back to the Voice of Healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.